Hey everyone, so it's me, Mutant Buster Green, and I'm dropping in with a quick review of TMNT Mutant Mayhem because I have a thing about mutants, and overall, this movie sort of disappointed me. Up front, when I got out of it, one of the first things someone asked me where I'd rank this movie amongst all the other Turtles movies ever made, so I had to come up with a quick list on the spot, and I think it holds up pretty well. The best movie is the original one because that movie was groundbreaking for its time. That movie's strangely enough, to this day, the most serious Ninja Turtles movie. And yeah, besides that, it completely perfectly adapts the material in a way that no other movie has. After that is Secret of the Ooze, which I give credit for continuing the good vibes from the first movie. Then, after that, strangely, I'm going to have to rank the third best Turtles movie as the most recent Michael Bay Turtles movie. Because I feel like they earned a lot of goodwill with me personally by trying to course correct from the shitty first Michael Bay movie and adding a lot of good stuff from the cartoons, which I enjoyed. Now, number 4 is going to be this movie, Mutant Mayhem, which I'm about to get into. And just rounding out the list, 5 is Michael Bay movie 1, and 6 is TMNT, the Samurai Who Wore Panties. And the worst Turtles movie ever is the TMNT movie by Imagi, which I did see in theaters the day it came out, and I don't remember a second of it other than they teased the Shredder would somehow come back, which also this movie does too, because every movie that doesn't have the Shredder has to tease he's going to come back eventually, because that's what people want to know about, what's Shredder up to. Anyway, yeah, for everything I wanted this movie to be, it ended up landing worse in my brain, worse than the Michael Bay movies, which is like kind of shocking. Like, I know the last Michael Bay movie did a lot of course correcting, and now I'm like starting to wonder if like maybe it would have been better if instead of this movie we had a third Michael Bay movie, because if they course corrected on top of the second course correct, maybe they would have finally had a good movie on their hands. But nah, this just wasn't it. So let me start talking about this movie from the top. So a couple of months ago, I did another video where I reacted like the first released info for this movie, the trailers, the cast list. I did a video that pretty much jotted down all my hopes and dreams for the absolute best version of this movie. And now that it's out, this movie definitely fell so far short of that hope. Like, I was thinking that because the Turtles in this movie strongly resemble their family-friendly 1980s cartoon versions, I thought this was just going to be a straightforward movie finally based on the old 80s cartoon, which for me personally, I think the 80s cartoon is kind of the best version of the Turtles. I know it's not the most mature version, I know it's not the coolest version, but god damn it, that's the version I grew up with, so that's the version I like the most. But instead, this movie is a complete mess. It resembles the comics a little bit, but I wouldn't say it even resembles the good comics that everyone likes. Like, it more resembles like the weird Archie comics where like everyone's kind of gay, and more than that, it seems to be heavily based on the gross out humor, or rather the gross out humor that was loosely implied by the original Ninja Turtle action figure line from the 1980s, where one or two characters just existed for like that stupid gross out character humor that kind of like prevailed through the 80s into the 90s. Like, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, for example, there was this old TMNT action figure in the original action figure line called Pizza Face. And this guy isn't even a mutant turtle, he's a mentally challenged pizza chef with a handicap. Look, he's got a freaking pizza cutter for a leg. What does that make sense? On top of that, he's covered in blood. So who the hell is this guy? Is he a serial killer? Is he an axe murderer? He only exists because of the cheap shock value of gross out humor, and that's the kind of like shit that this movie is like just stuffed to the gills with. Now, that being said, for this movie, the only thing I would say they did right is they did make the Turtles really cool, as a Ninja Turtles movie should. But then literally every single character who's not the Turtles, they made them a gross out joke character. Even friggin' April O'Neil, who I'm probably gonna have to get into later. But like, literally, the Ninja Turtles, they were never about gross out humor. Like, there were other brands that were all about gross out humor, like the fucking Garbage Pail Kids or like Booger Man. But that wasn't the Turtles. That's what like people thought the Turtles were if they only saw the toys and like nothing else. Like, it's really cringe shit, and this movie is like filled to the brim with like puke, slime, boogers, and nipples because of that. Because they just like chose the wrong like aspect to like get all invested in. And fuck it. Now let's talk about April O'Neil. So here's the thing about April. A lot of people were soapboxing that this movie was the first movie in history where April is not hot. And that's because in this movie, April is a fat, ugly black girl. And now a bunch of racists from like MAGA country came out of the woodwork and they were like, oh my gee, how could April O'Neil be black? But newsflash, April was black in the original comics, and she's been black in the most recent cartoon. And you know what? The black April in the most recent cartoon, completely swell character. She hits people with a baseball bat. She's very cool. I like her. But the thing is, I try to be open-minded about this and give it a God's honest chance. But in the context of the film, they not only play it up that she's fat, black, and ugly, they play it up that because she's fat, black, and ugly, she's disgusting. Because, again, they're trying to make every character in this movie disgusting. But for April, what they do is they make her fat, black, and ugly, and they make her puke all over the place. Like, literally, they made April a fucking punchline because of how gross and ugly she is in the movie. They basically treat her as, like, Meg from Family Guy, but, like, even Meg from Family Guy is, like, unconventionally attractive if you're, like, into that. Like, in this movie, like, the only turtle who, like, says she's beautiful is Leonardo, and then all the other turtles make fun of him because it's a big joke and he has, like, no, like, basis of, like, what a human woman is supposed to look like. On top of that, as bad as the April in this movie is, it could have been even worse because they released concept art of the April for this movie, and apparently she was always going to be black and ugly because that's what they were going for, but it could have been even worse because apparently in the unused April concept art that they revealed for this movie, there were some designs where she wasn't even a woman. Like, we could have had a male Black April, which would have been, like, even more, like, mind-boggling. Anyway, I'm just completely confused by this because it's one thing to make her black just because it's like a woke claim or diversity hire or whatever, but since they're constantly making fun of how fat and ugly she is in the movie, I feel like this character was kind of created to be like a token black character, but at the same time, her existence is just kind of shitting on black people. It's one of those situations where they tried so hard to not be racist, they went back around to the other side of the clock and became super racist. I hope I never get caught in one of those, by the way, because I do not feel comfortable talking about racist much. But anyway, the other thing I fucking hate about this movie was my biggest hope for this movie was that Giancarlo Esposito as Baxter Stockman was going to save this movie. And instead, he ended up being a fucking stud hire. He has 3 lines at the start of the film, and then he's like shot to death by the cops, and he's like just dead. I have major PTSD of like Bryan Cranston in Godzilla 2009, just for like more Breaking Bad actors like selling out and like shoehorning me into a movie that could have been better. Or like non-Breaking Bad related, John Goodman in Kong Skull Island. He's amazing, and then he like gets squished by King Kong. Anyway, yeah, so Baxter dies like in the first 5 minutes, and then they bring in this new villain called Superfly. Now, here's another thing pissing me off about this movie. So they decided to go with the comic mutagen rules, where the mutagen only makes the animal's intelligence after like they've like fully lived to the age of an adult human. But then at the end, the big stupid finale, they bring out this giant monster, which is a bunch of animals mutated together. And for that monster thing, they switch to the cartoon rules, where suddenly the mutagen just lets them combine any animals together willy-nilly or whatever. Anyway, Superfly was alright. He leads the Mutanimals, which are like kind of all over the place. They serve a role in the movie, but I don't think they were cool after seeing the movie. I didn't hate them either, but anyway, Superfly himself was okay. He was cool enough. I will say the movie did have a lot of cool scenes, even if it wasn't a great movie. Like, if I have to be a real nice guy right now and just praise the movie for the best parts of it, the parts where it's ripping off Spider-Verse, that works. Except when they decide to make everything look like nasty puke, then it kind of like cancels it out. But that being said, one thing I did really appreciate about this movie is the fight scenes. The fight scenes in this movie rule. The action scenes rule. The action scenes were so good, it did send me into that heaven space of like awesome TMNT action, which is what I actually came to this movie to see. And yeah, so if nothing else, they at least got the fight scenes right. There's also a really cool scene in like the middle of the movie where they have this like vehicle fight, and Bebop has this like monster truck from the TMNT arcade game, and that was fucking awesome. That was probably my favorite scene in the movie. Apart from that, I got so many mixed feelings on this one. Like the turtles themselves, all over the place, like super mixed. Leonardo is classic Leo, so that works. Raph is classic Raph, so that works. Donatello, they made him a little bit more normal, they made him a little bit more modern, they made him a little bit more down to earth, and they made him a little bit more of a modern nerd. So instead of being into like computers and robots, he's like into anime, like in a stupid way. It's kind of funny. He like wears a JoJo sweater in one scene, but he doesn't really do anything like super special in the film aside from like low-key reference to Attack on Titan all the time on like a basic level. My biggest disappointment was actually Michelangelo in this movie. Michelangelo in this movie has no personality, no defining moments. And like the only thing I can even remember him doing at all is he like interacted peacefully with Mondo Gecko, who's like canonically always his best friend. Otherwise, so disappointed by this universe's Michelangelo. But yeah, super weird movie. I feel like they originally planned for the villain to be Baxter Stockman, and then when Giancarlo Esposito was like, "I will work for you for one day, and then I'm out," I guess they like divided Baxter into like Superfly, and Superfly himself was okay-ish. Like, they made him cool enough. They made him like a typical blaxploitation villain. They gave him a pretty interesting arc where they set him up as an antagonist to Splinter. And Splinter was really cool in this one. They made him a rat again, not Hamato Yoshi. Actually, now that I think about it, they completely cut Hamato Yoshi out of this canon, which is going to make the Shredder setup really weird. Anyway, in this one, Splinter was just this normal rat who became a mutant, and then he became a kung fu master by obsessing over old VHS kung fu workout tapes. It's dumb, but it's not the dumbest explanation of his existence I've ever seen. I think that's still the original version where he just like copied Hamato Yoshi. Anyway, another thing I need to call out, like I said before, racists are downvoting this movie left and right because April is black and that's enough for them. They just don't get it, but it's a freaking kids movie. Like, move on. There's like more things to waste your energy on. Another thing that the racists are like downvoting out of nowhere is the fact that Splinter is being gay in this film. Okay, I watched the movie, Splinter's not gay, and there have definitely been way gayer versions of Splinter in the past. But yeah, I can kind of see where they're coming from because at the end of the film, they end up randomly shipping Splinter with Scumbug. Scumbug is another character from the original action figure line, and I don't know why, but I had one of these as a kid, and I thought it was ugly, and I left it in my bathroom for the rest of my life because I didn't want it interacting with my other action figures. But nonetheless, it comes back in this movie, and this is actually the first time it's ever appeared in like any Turtles media aside from being an action figure. And the only thing it does is puke and be horrific because half the jokes in this movie are just people puking. And anyway, at the end, it does date Splinter. Now, the original action figure was a man, but they go extremely technically out of the way to point out in this movie, for some reason, despite looking exactly the same as the old action figure, in this version, it's a lady. By the way, super weird that this is the second time in recent memory that a movie came out where Seth Rogen plays a pig and a disgusting hook between a rat and an insect occurs, grossing out the audience. Anyway, pretty much the most divisive thing about this movie is just the gross Black April and the gross Splinter romance. Although it's not a gay romance, so everyone saying that is just being needlessly homophobic towards gay people. Anyway, the last thing that's dividing people about this movie is the movie's ending, and I might as well just spoil it now so I can talk about it. So if you don't want the ending spoiled, turn off the video now and come back after you've seen the movie. So yeah, in the end of the movie, the turtles save the city, and as their reward, they get like human rights out of nowhere from the government, so then they get to go to high school and everyone loves them. And excuse me, what the fuck is this? This is a major deviation for the Turtles mythos. Like, how could they just like do this? Because it's like completely messes up the greater like arc of like the Turtles like being like secret ninja outcasts from society. Like that like cancels like at least 60% of like their plot lines. Like, did they just do this so they could set up a weird new Turtles in high school TV show? Anyway, it's dumb and it kind of pissed me off. The movie does have a post-credits teaser teasing that Shredder and Krang are going to probably be in the next movie to like torment the Turtles, but overall, otherwise, this movie was strange for me because I didn't really love it. I was like really disappointed in the gross out humor. It was like way too juvenile. The weird characterizations were like all over the place. Some were good, some were okay, some were just awful. So that made it hard for me to enjoy everything. I gotta say, I did enjoy all the action scenes. The action scenes really do save this movie and do deliver that turtle action I'm after, but overall, this movie's a mess, and I have to give it a 5 out of 10 in the end because it's just all over the place with good shit and bad shit. That being said, here's some pros and cons. Pros: art style is good, action scenes are good, New York is good, and I like that they use the action figures to create the story. Cons: April is gross, everything is gross. Baxter Stockman Esposito was a fake out. The characters are so annoying, and Michelangelo doesn't do anything. Anyway, yeah, this movie sets up a sequel. I guess I'll see it. I assume the sequel is going to get made because this movie's already making enough money. Oh wait, the movie made less money than the Mummies movie? Did the Mummies movie even make money? Anyway, alright, hopefully I can take some more time to review some other movies. Later, people. Good luck.